In part one, we talked to dreamologist Laurel Clark. But now, what do you know about magic? Maybe you already use magic consciously or subconsciously. Let's talk to psychic witch Matt Auryn to learn more. So Matt Auryn, welcome to Mystic Fix.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, let me give you your introduction here. Matt, you are a witch, a professional psychic, and occult teacher. You're the author of and I was so impressed by this multi-award-winning book, Psychic Witch, and you're a high priest in a sacred fires tradition of witchcraft. You teach at the Modern Witch University and have a regular column, Extrasensory Witchcraft, in Witches and Pagans magazine, right? Did I cover all the bases?
You covered a lot of them.
So there's probably more.
There's a lot, but it's yeah.
Yeah.
It's not necessary.
Well, so I have a copy of your beautiful new book, Mastering Magick, a course in spell casting for the psychic witch. And I just thought maybe you'd tell us a little bit. Well, maybe let's start first as your journey as a psychic witch and why you felt compelled to write this.
So this book was always going to be written. This was started with my first book, Psychic Witch. But when writing a book, publishers want you to stick with the word count.
Right.
So I had to figure out, well, what's my focus going to be? So I focused on the first book on primarily psychic ability and meditation and sort of performing magic by reverse engineering the process of psychic ability to manifest. And I left out anything that requires like tools or materia or herbs or anything like that. So then Mastering Magick was where I got to discuss those things after we got the foundation of sort of getting that internal system set up. Although I do kind of cover the bases, like the what you need to know from the first book in this book.
Yeah. So what sets this book apart from others in the market as far as spellcasting goes?
Well, a lot of it is my experience of what makes a spell actually work. Because I hear from a lot of people that they try spells and it either doesn't manifest or it manifests in a way that they did not intend it to. So a lot of this is my like tried and true tricks over the last couple decades of working magic and what I have learned. There's a lot of contributors in it. I wanted people to get sort of an idea of other magical workers, witches and non-witches, and how they work and how they approach magic. Because I do believe that magic is something that should be personal and it should be something that you resonate with. So if a book is telling you to do something one way and you're doing it and doing it and doing it and it's not working, perhaps you need to figure out why and how that can be tailored to you as a person and your spiritual path.
So let's talk about spells and magic for a moment. The Mystic Fix listeners might not know exactly what you even mean by that. I think a lot of people think of curses and a lot of sort of dark energy stuff, but why don't you elaborate on what you're going for when you talk about a spell?
Okay. So one of the ways that I compare it in the book is you could see it a lot like prayer, except it's a lot more proactive. And it often uses symbolic physical items that you're ritualistically, symbolically connecting with to help strengthen that manifestation of what you're desiring. One of the biggest differences between prayer and magic is so the analogy that I use in the book is I compare it to driving. So, when people say, Jesus, take the wheel, that's perfect analogy for prayer. It's this idea of giving it off to a higher power, to someone else, to figure out the best way to get to the destination of what you want. But it may not necessarily be exactly what you wanted, but what that divinity feels is right for you. Magic is a little bit more proactive, where you're in the driver's seat and you get to specify exactly which route you want to take and exactly where you want to get to. So if we were to compare, just off the top of my head, to use a metaphor, the driving to trying to get to a hotel, so you can pray to get to a hotel using this metaphor, and you'll end up in a hotel, but it may not necessarily be the hotel that you wanted. It may not, exactly be what you intended, but you still got it. Whereas magic, you can be like, okay, well, I want to go to, a 5-star Hilton, for the night.
Yeah. So what are some examples of some of the spells that you have in this book?
So this book is very focused on psychic ability. There's some kind of what we consider basic things, such as protection and cleansing and stuff like that, which are necessary for a magical practice and just kind of a spiritual life in general. But most of the spells in the book are focused on activating your psychic ability and awakening your psychic ability. So it kind of creates an Ouroboros with the first book, where there's this feedback loop of using psychic ability to enhance your magic. And then this book is like, here's some magic to enhance your psychic ability.
Oh, cool.
And that kind of combination helps one to approach what we call in witchcraft the mysteries, which are sort of a personal gnosis path of self-realization. So they're things that even in like witchcraft or other mystery traditions, you can talk about, you can explain, but you can't really convey it fully to someone else unless they have the experience. One of the metaphors I often use to try to explain this is either sex or hallucinogenics. Both concepts, before you have that experience, you can kind of explain to someone what it's like and they can have sort of an idea of what you mean. But until they actually have that experience, they aren't going to be on the full page with you. And their experience may be very, very different from your own, because it's more about what their soul needs. So I'm very big on, finding what works for you and your path without trying to force a specific belief system on someone. Even the structure that I give of theory, I'm very clear in the first book, and I believe I mentioned it in the second book too, is that we see them as reality maps. So they're sort of ideas that help us navigate things, but they shouldn't be confused for the terrain. They're just helpful maps.
Yeah. Do you think there's a difference between a witch and a magician?
Yes and no. I mean, it depends on who you ask. So I personally see a difference. I see witches as magicians. I don't see all magicians as witches. Magicians is a broad term, just like witchcraft. But witchcraft has sort of a history behind it of there's sort of an oppositional current to witchcraft. And what I mean by that is it's often very outside of major religious structures or political structures.
A lot of baggage.
Ceremonial magic often is more in alignment with a religious tradition like Judaism or Christianity or something of that nature. Whereas witchcraft is sort of always kind of on the outskirts, kind of on the margins. One of the folk tales that we have, like sort of a modern myth, was given to us by Charles Leland, this folklorist, centuries ago. And he apparently got his lore from an Italian witch. And in that myth called Aradia, the goddess Diana from Greek mythology sent down Aradia because there was tyranny in the land, there was a lot of corruption. So as a way to balance out the playing field by sending this person to teach magic to people so that they could gain a leverage. I know ancient Egyptian mythology has a very similar myth with deities of what they call Heka, which is our term for magic, being given to sort of help balance the playing field in terms of fate and destiny.
Okay. Okay. And isn't magic really just energy and intention, right?
Yeah, yeah. Intention is a word that I often try to define, though, because magic is a little bit more focused than intention. So the way that I explain it is, um, I see a difference between intention and will. So intention is necessary. Intention is like, I want to cross the street, but you can intend to cross the street all the time. You can put as much thought power into it, but until you actually will yourself to cross the street, you're not going to cross the street. So one of the key definitions of magic that you'll constantly come across is the keyword of will being put in there. And it's often capitalized, which gives it a different connotation. It's a reference to true will. So it's about being in alignment with your higher self and with sort of the divine will. The closest comparison, and I don't want to say it's the same thing, but the closest comparison would be like Buddhism or Hinduism with their concept of dharma and being in
Right.
alignment with your dharma.
That's exactly where I was kind of going.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love, and one of the things that I'm always seeking to do in my program is unite these belief systems, these very diverse, oftentimes radically different belief systems that have some of the same energies and ideas beneath them. And you can find a lot of mysticism even in Christianity and Judaism. And
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So what would do you recommend that a beginner start with your first book, or can they plow right into Mastering Magick? I liked how you called it sort of an Ouroboros, because it doesn't matter where you begin in an Ouroboros. But you please go on. Explain how you would treat a beginner here.
Yeah. So I had difficulty as an author approaching the second book because the second book builds on the first book.
Okay.
But I know that some people are going to pick up the second book as their first book,
Hmm.
So as an author, I have this dilemma of like, do I just say, see the material in my first book, or do I repeat the same things in the second book? And so the way that I approached it is I present the core things you need to know about like grounding and centering and entering alpha, and kind of the primary nuts and bolts of Psychic Witch. But the way that I approached it was based on feedback from my first book, because I had several people telling me that they either had aphantasia, which is the inability to see images in their mind's eye, or that they had ADHD and had trouble focusing. So I crafted like I think 25 different like energy techniques, and I got a group of friends who were diagnosed with those things, and I had them experiment and see what I could get to work for them. And what ended up working were like 4 or 5 of them that I put in the book. So you can start with either. I highly recommend starting with Psychic Witch, but it's really a personal decision. I have made it to where you can just pick up Mastering Magick and start there.
Yeah. And you have actual tools in the book. You've got sigils, and which for those who don't know are kind of symbols, right? To focus on, to meditate on, and bring energies to you and kind of keep your energy directed. Do you have are there essential tools for a psychic witch?
For Psychic Witch, I would really just say it's your mind.
Okay.
That's why the first book isn't focused on any of that at all.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things that is different about Mastering Magick and is different about my approach with magic is even when we're approaching tools and herbs and stuff of that nature, I have a very animist bend. So it's more about connecting with the spirit of that tool or that herb instead of just using it as like an ingredient in something,
Uh-huh. It's not a
Uh,
recipe.
yeah, so a lot of that still has to deal with that sort of that inner connection and the direction of energy. So like Psychic Witch is really focused on that sort of energy manipulation and energy mastery that will make magic, when you step to traditional spellcraft, more powerful and more palpable.
Yeah. Matt, are there any myths or misconceptions you would like to debunk?
Oh my gosh, there's so many.
I
Um,
thought there might be.
you know, ranging from, like that this is some sort of like satanic practice,
Right.
um, to, the idea that um, it's a modern practice, which it is in a lot of regards. A lot of the revival of witchcraft specifically in the West is modern, but it has roots in very ancient things. It didn't just like invent itself overnight. It draws on like ancient Hermeticism and like ancient Neoplatonic thought. And a lot of that has sort of been lost in mainstream writings of witchcraft, and I try to bring that back so people can see, the depth that actually is in witchcraft and its mysteries.
So some of
And
this is as old or older than Christianity, even.
oh yes, absolutely. And in fact, Christianity, the church was heavily influenced by Neoplatonism as well.
Sure.
So you'll end up seeing similar concepts. So even their idea of the Trinity comes straight from Neoplatonism. And we have documents of like church founders debating on, like, should we incorporate this? Should we not? It's too
Uh-huh.
pagan, it's pagan, but you know, um, but we do have these roots in the West that started with Plato and kind of grew from Neoplatonism, which was sort of like a second wave with different influences on the teachings of Plato.
Yeah. So Matt, are there any ethical considerations that a witch should keep in mind when doing spell casting and magic?
Yeah, I am very big on the idea of sovereignty. And that is one of the things that sets a witch apart is that we are responsible for ourselves and our actions. Um, so ethics are a personal thing, and I think it's a learning experience.
Mhm.
Some people will go as far as to say, you shouldn't do anything that violates anyone's free will or harms anyone. I disagree. I don't think anything's as clear cut and dry. For example, let's say that you have a serial killer in your neighborhood, to use an extreme example, and you have the means and the powers to stop them, but you don't because it's violating their free will. So which is
Yeah.
the greater good and which isn't? And that becomes an issue of
Right.
ethics.
Well,
Um,
what
I
what about
tend
something? What I'm sorry. What about something like a love spell? Because if somebody is not attracted to a person, they should have the right to not be attracted to that person, right? And
I
versus being
I
put under a spell.
I personally agree. So I'm a big advocate of doing magic on yourself, only on yourself and for
Okay.
yourself.
Uh-huh.
There are times when things need to be done for community or for other people, definitely. But the way that I approach love spells is I recommend doing a love spell on yourself first and foremost, and
Hmm.
then doing love spells that draw the right partner into your life instead of
Ah,
targeting a specific person, because
right.
then it gets into a very non-consensual thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Weirdness.
think when anything comes to non-consensus or violating free will, it should be justified. So I would say that love spells don't fall under that justification of why you would use, you know, that sort of a
Yeah.
thing. So an example is one of my teachers, Lori Cabot. She was on Unsolved Mysteries, like way back in the day. And she was on it because she's a witch in Salem, and she's known for her psychic ability. And there was a woman, Martha Bradford, who went missing. And police couldn't figure out anything about it. And eventually, one of the police officers, I guess his wife was a student of Lori's, so she convinced him to go see Lori. And so she tuned in and was like, here's what happened. There was like this boat incident with this man, her body's in the water over here. So they went and they looked and they found the body. So they come back and they're like, you're right, but we can't find the man. We can't find where he's fled to, he's completely gone. So she does her thing again. She enters Alpha. She's like, okay, well, I see him approaching like the Canadian border right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a binding spell on him so that he makes a horrible mistake that will end up getting him caught. And she
Oh,
did, and they found him exactly there because he went into a cabin that was empty. And the neighbors knew, oh, those people only come during like a seasonal time, the owner. So
uh-huh.
they called the cops, and the cops arrested him. So that's
Huh.
technically a violation of his free will. She imposed her will
Got
upon.
it. Got
So
it.
ethics aren't clear cut, you know,
Yeah.
it's very
Yeah.
personal. My main thing is don't be a dick with your magic, you know, don't be a
Uh-huh.
bully, don't
Right.
be creepy with it, because I do think that these things do come back to you, whether it comes back times three like some people believe, or sometimes just the results of the manifestation can be
Mm-hmm.
enough punishment. In the 90s, I grew up with the movie The Craft. I don't know if you saw that or not with
I've
Bruce
seen it.
Zibal.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So Rochelle, who's played by Rachel True, the African-American character, she does a curse on her racist bully, Laura, who's blonde, and the curse works. And they're on a swim team together. And the curse is to have her lose all her blonde hair. And she comes across her in the locker in the shower, crying with her hair falling out. And you can see Rachel just feels horrible to the core. And I think that's a great, even though it's fantasy, a great illustration of sometimes it's very like the oldest motif in all of folklore, all of fairy tale, all of mythology is be careful what you wish for. And
Right.
in Mastering Magic, I put a strong focus on like, okay, well, like let's figure out exactly what you want and the best route to get it without any mishaps. But I think when it comes into violating free will like that, I think as long as you're not like a sociopath, you know, it's going to hurt you. I also believe that magic itself is intelligent. I don't think I see it more as like a spirit being an animist, and
Hmm.
I think that you can lose it. Like I think it can see like, no, we're not gonna work with you in this way. Um,
Okay.
so I think the golden rule is the best, but I do believe that there are acts of justice that sometimes are necessary.
Well, Matt Auryn, this went by so fast, but I just want to say Llewellyn is offering one of our people in the audience a free copy of your wonderful book, Mastering Magick, a course in spellcasting for the psychic witch. And oh my gosh, I would love to have you on again sometime. Is there a way people can contact you if they wanted to reach out?
Yeah, so I'm on pretty much all social media as Matt Auryn, Matauryn. Be careful with imposters. They're rampant right now. So if there's a
Yeah.
misspelling, if there's punctuation, if quote unquote, I message you being like, hey, I would like to talk you into a reading, like it's not
Right.
me, block
We all
them,
get
report
those.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. That was author and psychic witch Matt Auryn. In part 3, we'll do some tarot card readings. Stay tuned.